If you suddenly found your dreams haunted by a pedophilic burn victim, could you outsmart Freddy Krueger and survive? The first encounter is with a girl named Tina wandering around some kind of factory. Freddy jumps out and scares Tina. In her pathetic attempt to run away, she turns down this corridor, which is a dead end. I also want to mention that she could have easily seen this was a dead end before she ran down it. After her stupid decision to corner herself, her only defense is to close her eyes and scream.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
Freddy grabs her from behind and she wakes up. Her mom comes in and she sees that her nightgown had been cut, which is weird. Freddy never actually cut her in the dream. He only slashed some hanging cloth, not her nightgown. The next day she is talking with her friends about it, and they all shrug it off like it's just any old nightmare. Let's face it, no one is going to jump to the conclusion that it was real and you are in imminent danger. Everyone that is put in this situation would do the same thing she did and believe that it's just a nightmare. Later that night, Tina invites her friends over to stay the night since she was freaked out from that dream she had. Plus, she tells Nancy that she has been seeing his burned face and hearing him scrape his finger knives all day. After hearing Tina describe Freddy, Nancy tells her that she had a dream about the same guy, and after a quick trip to Pound Town, emphasis on quick. Rod tells her he also had a nightmare last night. With everyone in your friend group all having a nightmare about the same guy, you would think that this would make you think maybe there is some danger here and that you should be careful and get some help. Right? Wrong. You would just think it's a coincidence, but even if you took this as an absolute threat and decided to go get help, no one would believe you, and even if they did believe you, they wouldn't know what to do about it. The fact is, in a horror movie, if you are the first person to come across the killer, you're toast. Tina hears some rocks hitting her window, then a creepy voice calling her name. She goes outside to check it out. There are two possibilities here. One is that you are still awake and some creepy asshole is outside calling your name, and two is that you are asleep and some creepy asshole is outside calling your name. Either way, why the fuck would you go outside to check on it? Ultimately, it wouldn't matter either way. Freddy could just as easily come into her room to get her. She continues to follow the voice out into an alleyway where she is confronted by Freddy. Of course, Tina runs away. Looking at the chase, it's pretty clear that Freddy is just toying with her and that she has absolutely no chance of escaping. If a guy cutting his own fingers off while laughing doesn't tell you that you're screwed, I don't know what will. Back in the bedroom, we see her getting dragged up to the ceiling and her chest getting sliced open. At least Rod gets definitive proof that the threat is real, not that it does him any good. I know most people would say that fleeing the scene was a mistake, and I tend to agree. However, I can definitely understand why he would run. Nobody is going to believe his story. If you look at this from Rod's perspective, he just got woken up in the middle of the night seeing his girlfriend get ripped open and dragged up to the ceiling. He has no idea who or what did this. All he knows is that she had a bad dream the prior night like he did, and now she has been butchered by some unnatural entity. So I think whether he ran or stayed and talked to the police, he is going to end up in jail. They may find some kind of evidence to suggest that someone else did it, but Freddy would get him long before that. So it's not going to matter, his fate is unavoidable. Also, the fact that Nancy and Glenn didn't see what happened is also going to hurt his case. They just heard screaming, then came in to find this mess. At the police station, Nancy is telling Lieutenant Thompson, who happens to be her father, about what happened. Lieutenant Thompson believes that Rod is the one who killed Tina. What a shocker. Nancy is defending Rod, saying he wouldn't do something like that, and she also tells them about the nightmares they have been having. Of course, Lieutenant Thompson doesn't believe her, and he starts a manhunt for Rod. The next morning, Nancy is walking to school. I don't know about you all, but I probably would have taken the day off anyways. During her walk, Rod grabs her and pulls her into the bushes. He tries to convince Nancy that he didn't do it, and he tells her that there was someone else there. But before he can elaborate further, he gets interrupted by Lieutenant Thompson.
Real easy, like your ass depended on it.
He makes a break for it, but is quickly surrounded and arrested. Nancy falls asleep during class, which was one of my favorite pastimes. She sees her friend Tina standing there in a body bag, which should tell her that she is dreaming. She goes out into the hallway and sees her getting dragged around a corner. When she follows her, she runs into a girl wearing Freddy's sweater.
Where's your pass? Screw your pass.
As she is running away, she hears the hall monitor.
No running in the hallway.
She ignores it and continues to follow the blood trail. I don't know about you all, but I think she is well past the point where she should be trying to wake herself up. She goes down into the basement looking for Tina, who is dead, so that is pretty dumb if you ask me. She is confronted by Freddy, who cuts himself open, then begins chasing her. She gets herself cornered, and as Freddy is closing in, she burns herself on a pipe to wake up from the nightmare. After her outburst, Nancy leaves class. As she is outside crying, she realizes that when she burned herself in the dream, it also burned her for real. This is the first real proof that shows her what happens in her dreams also affects her out in the real world. She goes to visit Rod in jail to talk to him about what happened and maybe get some more information. Rod's description of what happened is not very useful. He basically says that cuts just appeared on her body out of nowhere, and he says that it was like 4 razor blades were cutting her at once. That was enough info to tell Nancy that she is dreaming about the same guy that killed Tina. The unfortunate part is that this does not give her any clues on how to stop Freddy. Unless she plans on never sleeping again, she has to find a way to stop Freddy. This is for sure going to be an uphill battle. Freddy by himself would be hard enough to deal with, but with the lack of sleep you are also going to experience memory issues, trouble thinking and concentrating, making coming up with a plan that much harder. She should warn Rod before she leaves and at least tell him what she knows, but she only tells him that she doesn't think that he did it. Not that it really matters though. Once he got arrested and was trapped in this cell, he was pretty much fucked. Later that night, Nancy decided to waste time taking a bubble bath. This is really stupid. She should be spending every second trying to figure out a way to get rid of Freddy. Also, she should be trying to stay awake, and lying down in a warm bath is definitely not going to help her with that. As Freddy tries to get to third base, Nancy's mom warns her to not fall asleep in the bathtub. She yells back, "I know," then immediately falls asleep. Freddy then pulls her down into the tub. Luckily for her, her mom heard her scream, and when she banged on the door, it was enough to wake her up. When her mom comes in, she just tells her that she fell getting out of the tub. Probably a good idea, no one is going to believe her if she told the truth. After her bath, she goes into her room and she is trying to stay awake by watching movies. The staying awake part I can get behind, but watching movies right now is just more time wasting. But to be fair, there's not a lot that she can do. This is the 80s, she can't just get on the internet and try to do some research. The only way that she can really gather information is to fall asleep and see what info she can gather in her dreams, like she did before burning herself to wake up. The main problem with this is it's extremely dangerous. You can't rely on being able to wake yourself like when she was in the bathtub. There wasn't really any way that she could injure herself to wake up. If her mother wasn't there, she would have drowned. So if her next dream is some scenario like that, or Freddy is just tired of toying with her and decides to end it quickly, she is screwed. She has to find some reliable help. Glenn shows up. They start talking about Nancy's nightmares, but Glenn hasn't had a dream about Freddy yet, so he doesn't believe any of it and still thinks that Rod killed Tina. Nancy asks Glenn to watch over her while she sleeps and that she is going to look for somebody. I guess that means she is going to sleep to find Freddy. She goes outside with Glenn watching. Honestly, this was probably Freddy. She goes to check on Rod inside his jail cell and sees Freddy walk in. She yells for Glenn, who is nowhere to be found. When she looks back, Freddy is gone and Tina appears right behind her with bugs coming out of her mouth. I think it's time to wake up now. Freddy chases her back to her house and watches her struggle to get up the stairs. She looks into her mirror, telling herself it's a bad dream and trying to wake herself up. What she needs to do is break the mirror and cut herself with a piece of glass to wake up. Too late. As Freddy is about to kill her, her alarm goes off, waking her up just in time. She gets pissed off at Glenn.
Bastard.
But to be honest, it wasn't his fault. She was very vague about what she was doing, and he doesn't even believe in Freddy yet. He still thinks it's just a nightmare. After Nancy's nightmare with Rod in it, her and Glenn go down to the police station to check on Rod. While they are trying to convince them to go check on him, Rod's bed sheets slowly start to wrap around his neck and pull him across the cell. It sure seems like Freddy is going out of his way to make this one look like a suicide and cover his tracks. That's a little out of character. I think it didn't seem like he cared if anyone knew when he was butchering Tina. It just kind of worked out for him, and he was going to kill Nancy while she was in the middle of class. If she started floating in the air, getting ripped to pieces in the middle of English class, it certainly would have raised a few eyebrows. After Rod's funeral, Nancy describes Freddy to her father and says that he is the one who killed Tina. It seems like he knows who Freddy is, but still thinks that Nancy is just suffering from some kind of stress-induced trauma from her friends being killed. This is a good step in getting him to believe that Freddy is real, but let's be honest for a second. Even if she convinces her father that Freddy is real, what is he going to do about it? Freddy is just one of those enemies that is virtually unstoppable without some insane level of plot armor. Nancy's mother takes her to a clinic to conduct a sleep study on her to try and figure out why she keeps having nightmares. At first, all the readings seem normal, then all of a sudden the machine spikes and Nancy starts screaming in her sleep. When they wake her up, part of her hair is gray. She has cuts on her arm and she manages to pull Freddy's hat off of his head and bring it into reality. You would think this would be a big win for Nancy, but unfortunately it's still not enough to convince them that Freddy is real, and everyone thinks she just found the hat somewhere else and brought it with her. The doctor also tried to sedate her, but she shoved him away before he could inject her. This was a good thing too. Extended sleep caused by a drug would have been a death sentence. This did give her valuable information, though now she knows that she can pull him from the dream world into reality and try to kill him out here. But given the number of movies in this franchise, I would say that even that won't work. Once Freddy has his sights set on you, one way or another you're fucked. The next morning, Nancy is arguing with her mother over the hat that she pulled out of her dreams. The hat even has his name on it, but her mother is still in denial.
Avoid everything happening to me by just getting good and loaded.
Sounds like a good time, but stopping Freddy should take priority. After some good parenting, Nancy storms out and goes to talk to Glenn. He tells her about the Balinese way of dreaming where you can gain some control in your dreams. It sounds good, but I don't think it would work with Freddy. Most of the time, they don't even realize they are dreaming till Freddy starts chasing them. I imagine it would take time to gain control over your dreams as well. I don't think it's as easy as read a book, now you are the master of your dreams. It's going to take practice. Nancy was reading a book on booby traps, so it seems like her plan is to set up a bunch of traps around her house and then pull Freddy into the real world and deal with him here. It is risky, but not a terrible plan. As Nancy returns home, she sees that her parents have put bars on all the windows because they think a killer is on the loose.
Come down to the cellar with me and I'll tell you.
Well, that's pretty damn creepy. Once downstairs, she begins telling Nancy about Freddy. He was a child murderer who, due to an improperly signed search warrant, got released on a technicality. Some of the parents in the neighborhood took matters into their own hands. They tracked Freddy to the boiler room where he used to take his victims, and they set the place on fire with him inside. Apparently, Nancy's mom decided to take Freddy's glove as a souvenir. I am getting more and more creeped out by this mother by the second. Nancy calls Glenn to warn him about Freddy. It seems like she is finally ready to bring him in on her plan. She wants to wait until midnight, then have Glenn come over, and when she pulls Freddy out of her dream, have Glenn beat him to death with a baseball bat. The mistake here is waiting till midnight for him to come over. She should have him cover now so they can keep each other in check so neither one of them fall asleep before they are ready. Nancy calls Glenn to check on him, but he has fallen asleep and his parents answer the phone instead.
Glenn's asleep. You'll have to talk to him tomorrow.
He also left the phone off the hook, so she has no way to contact him remotely, so she has to go over there. As she starts to leave, the phone that she pulled out of the wall earlier starts to ring. She picks it up and Freddy gives her some tongue action. This is really strange, not only because a phone tried to put a tongue in her mouth, but Nancy hasn't fallen asleep yet. So I guess that means that she is so tired she is starting to dream while she is awake, and Freddy can tap into those dreams as well. Anyways, over to poor Glenn. This showcases how dangerous of a threat Freddy is. This was Glenn's first time interacting with Freddy and he goes for the kill immediately. I don't see a way out of this. I can't really blame him for any of the decisions that he made. Freddy is a far-fetched idea that without definitive proof you just are not going to believe it, and if the first time you get that proof Freddy turns you into a blood fountain, well, you're fucked. When the cops come to mop up Glenn, Nancy calls her father to try and make him believe that Freddy is the one who has killed everyone, and she tries to get him to come over and be there when she pulls Freddy out of her nightmare.
But she'll be here to catch him?
Lieutenant, they're waiting for you upstairs. Yeah, sure, I'll be there, sweetheart. Now look, you just get yourself some rest, please.
Not very convincing. She can't count on her father showing up. He still just believes that it's just some killer on the loose. He does at least ask another officer to go watch the house and call him if he sees anything strange, so that's something, I guess. Nancy then begins setting up booby traps around her house. She puts gunpowder in a light bulb and rigs a sledgehammer in a doorway. For some reason, she doesn't put a single trap in her room where she plans on pulling Freddy out. She should put some kind of trap that would activate right when she pulls Freddy out to at least momentarily stun him. The traps throughout the rest of the house aren't going to do her any good if he murders her in her bedroom. In the dream, Nancy was able to jump on Freddy and grab him right as her alarm went off. When she first wakes up, it seems like Freddy is nowhere to be found. Then he jumps out and screams before attacking. For some reason, she runs around the side of the bed away from the door to grab the coffee pot and bash him in the head instead of bolting out of the door. If this was real life, he would have slashed her as she ran around. She then leads him into the useless sledgehammer trap and screams out the window for her father. Freddy then stumbles into her explosive lamp trap, which does almost nothing. She leads Freddy down into the basement where she sets him on fire. Okay, this one could definitely do some damage. She thinks this kills him, but when the cops break in, they find a trail of fire leading upstairs. They find Freddy on top of her mom, and when they put the fire out, her skeleton starts being dragged down into some kind of portal. She realizes that she never actually woke up, and she turns her back on Freddy, deciding to not believe in him, and this seems to take his power away. Nancy leaves the room and finds herself outside with her mother like it's the next morning, and she is on her way to school. Glenn, Rod, and Tina pull up, and Nancy runs to get in the car. It seems like a weird happily ever after moment until the convertible's roof slams shut, and it has red and green stripes just like Freddy's sweater. The doors lock, and the windows start going up by themselves. Nancy is screaming to try and warn her mother, but she seems oblivious to what is going on. The car starts to drive off with the kids by itself. As Nancy's mother is standing there in her bliss, Freddy grabs her and pulls her through the window on the door, and the movie ends. Unfortunately, Freddy is one of those villains that is borderline unbeatable. It is nearly impossible to tell his nightmares from reality until he wants you to. He can toy with you as long as he wants, like he does with Nancy this entire movie, or he can just waste you the first time you see him like he does with Glenn. No matter what, one way or another. Now that I have gone through the movie, I am going to rate each character on the death meter. Basically, I am going to rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 on how dumb they are, 1 being the best score possible, and a 10 being the worst. Let's start off with Tina. During her first encounter with Freddy, she gets herself cornered. It is not a very long corridor and there is plenty of light. She could clearly see it was a dead end before running down it. I don't think I need to spell this out, but getting yourself cornered when a homicidal maniac is trying to kill you is not a good idea. Once she is cornered, she does the only thing she could do, and that's close her eyes and kiss her ass goodbye. Once she wakes up and sees that her nightgown was ripped, most people might say that she should have known now that the dream was real. I don't think so. Most people would just think they must have ripped it in their sleep and shrug it off. I think most people would do exactly what Tina does, which is pretty much nothing. You might be a bit freaked out by the extremely lucid dream, but at the end of the day still think it's just some nightmare and you are not in any real danger. Fast forward to her next dream, when she hears rocks hitting her window and a creepy voice calling her name. She decides to go outside and check it out. This is really stupid, whether it's in a dream or not. Going outside by herself to confront some creepy asshole calling your name is just asking to get yourself killed. At the end of the day, it didn't really matter what she did. Staying in the room or going outside, I think Freddy was going to get her no matter what. But because of her stupid decision-making, I am going to give her an 8 out of 10 on the death meter. Next up, let's talk about Rod. When he is witnessing Tina being massacred by Freddy, I don't think he could have done anything to help her. Waking up in the middle of the night to the sounds of your girlfriend ripped apart by some supernatural force. I don't think anyone is ready to deal with that situation, so I am not going to knock him for that. As far as his choice to flee the scene before the cops got there, I actually think was the correct choice. While it is true that running is going to make him look more guilty, even if he stayed and talked to the cops, I still believe they would bring him in for questioning and they can hold him for up to 96 hours. He is definitely not going to be able to figure this out sitting in a jail cell, and there is not a chance in hell that the cops would believe him if he told them the truth. If he tried to say that someone else was in the room, leaving out all the supernatural stuff, I still don't think they would buy his story. There were no signs of forced entry, and Glenn and Nancy came in pretty fast, and they didn't see anyone. Also, they would question why he didn't try to harm Rod at all. His biggest mistake was trying to see Nancy. It's pretty common for police to monitor known associates when they are looking for someone, so getting in touch with Nancy was pretty dumb. It was also pointless. Nancy doesn't know anything about Freddy, yet she couldn't possibly help him. Once he got arrested and was stuck in this cell, it was just a matter of time before Freddy got him. You could say that he could do what Nancy does later and pull him out in the jail cell and hope that the cops get in there before he is able to kill you. That would actually be a decent strategy, but the main problem is Rod doesn't really understand what is going on yet and has no idea what Freddy is. He didn't seem too concerned about trying to stay awake and figure out a way to fight Freddy. I don't think Rod is the brightest crayon in the box, and we don't get to see how he handled the nightmares with Freddy, but I imagine it wasn't well, so I will just give him a 7 on the death meter. Next up is Captain Jack Sparrow.
No one come to save me just because they missed me.
There isn't really a whole lot to say about Glenn. He spent most of the movie not believing Freddy was real, and the first encounter he has with Freddy, he gets killed immediately. You could say that he should have believed Nancy sooner and not fallen asleep like he did, but let's be honest, that's what pretty much everyone else would do as well. I guess I will just go down the middle with him and give him a 5. Finally, let's talk about Nancy, our final girl. When Glenn and Nancy break in and find the mess that used to be Tina, it's understandable that they would be in shock, and their first instinct is going to be that Rod killed her. Nancy does defend Rod at the police station, saying he wouldn't do something like that, but I think that is pretty unrealistic. Finding something like that would leave you in shock, and you could look at the scene with blood on the ceiling and put together that Rod isn't capable of doing that, but in the moment, No one is going to overanalyze the scene. You would just know that Tina is dead and Rod was the only one in here with her. At school, when Nancy falls asleep following Tina's corpse down into a creepy-ass boiler room is probably not a good idea, but I will cut her some slack. She probably doesn't think any of this is real, and that she is not in any real danger yet. When Freddy has her cornered, she burns herself to force herself awake. That was quick thinking that gave her some valuable information. She now knows that she can be harmed in her dreams. Going home and taking a relaxing bubble bath is pretty dumb, though it's going to make staying awake difficult and is a huge waste of time the moment she realized this was real. Every moment should go to figuring out how to stop this. She is just lucky her mom heard her, or her story would have ended right here. You would think that almost drowning would light a fire under her ass to try and figure this out, but right after almost dying for the second time today, she just goes to her room and tries to stay awake all night by watching movies, wasting more time. To be fair to her, though, this is the 80s. With her parents not letting her leave the house, there isn't much she can do to figure this out other than just brainstorming ideas by herself. Glenn comes over that night, but he hasn't encountered Freddy yet and still thinks that Rod killed Tina, so he isn't going to be much help, but at least he agrees to watch over her while she sleeps. In her second dream, I don't think she even realizes that she is dreaming until she sees Freddy walk into Rod's cell. When Freddy was on top of her about to kill her, the alarm goes off, waking her up. I have to say it was a good call to not rely on Glenn alone to wake her up. Had she not set that alarm, Nancy and Glenn would have had another Tina and Rod situation. As a side note, I want to mention that she should have pulled Freddy out. Right here you can see pretty clearly that she has a hold of him when she gets woken up. Going to the sleep clinic was a good idea. I can't give credit to Nancy for this, though it was her mother's idea.
Mother!
At the clinic there are people monitoring her sleep, so at least there are reliable people to wake her up quickly. Once she got woken up, she had cuts on her arm, and she managed to pull Freddy's hat out of her dream. You might think this would be enough to make people start believing her, but Freddy is a pretty far out there idea, and until they experience Freddy firsthand, no one is going to believe he is real. Preparing booby traps around her house is a good idea, although they were mostly useless except for setting him on fire in the basement. At the end, when she realized she was still sleeping and got rid of Freddy by convincing herself that he isn't real, it seems like a good strategy, but I don't think it would work. You have to bring up the question of how these kids starting dreaming of Freddy in the first place. None of them knew who he was, and they can't believe in someone they have never heard of before. The parents knew who Freddy was. They were the ones who killed him, so I think it just means that as long as anyone believes in Freddy, he can materialize in anyone's dream. The only way to get rid of Freddy for good is for someone to go around like the Terminator and get rid of everyone who has even heard of Freddy, then Ice himself. I don't think anyone is going to sign up for that job, but even that is not a for sure way to get rid of him. If he catches on to what you are doing, he can just keep hopping into other people's dreams and let them go on purpose, so there is always someone who believes in him. Once Freddy was gone and she walked through the door, it was somehow the next morning and she was outside with her mother. She should immediately know that she is still dreaming, but she seems completely unaware. That is until the car locks her in and drives off on its own. I don't think this disbelieving thing she did earlier actually worked and Freddy was just toying with her. At this point, Nancy is pretty much out of options. She is stuck in this car with her friends who are not even real, being hauled off by Freddy, who is going to do God knows what to her. I have to say that Nancy is one of the best final girls of all time, but she isn't perfect and definitely made some mistakes, but I think I will give her a 3 out of 10 on the death meter. In closing, I would say that surviving Freddy is virtually impossible, but what do you think? Could you survive Freddy? If you made it this far into the video, I would really appreciate it if you would subscribe, leave a like, and let me know what movie to cover next. And remember, if a creepy voice is calling your name in the middle of the night, don't go check it out.